Hello, D&D bags. It's Tom from Peryton's Roost. And you're probably wondering, Tom, what the hell's going on? I can't see a video, I can't see any sort of animation. What are you doing? So I guess I want to welcome you to the first ever episode of something slightly different. A show or segment, I guess, by the name of Tavern Talk. A kind of segment where I want to talk about my own experiences of being a D&D, being a DM, my own experiences within D&D, being a DM, and sometimes a player as well, and also to talk about concepts and interesting things in D&D which are kind of up for debate. Things like my video on wounds, for example, would be quite an interesting segment on this. And I'll cover other kind of topics as well. But the main thing I wanted to do with Tavern Talk was conduct a few interviews with other DMs and players within the D&D community. So as my kind of Twitter following grows and my YouTube channel gains a little bit of traction, I am attempting to engage more and more with a kind of other YouTubers, other kind of D&D kind of content creators online, and get their opinions on things. You know, see how they run their sessions, kind of get tips and tricks from them. So it's a lovely July afternoon. I'm sat in my normal recording room and I'm looking outside, and the sky has a kind of a sprawling of clouds. However, the beautiful bright blue sky can be seen kind of poking through, and the sun hasn't quite set yet, but it's casting a nice glow on the trees just around my house, which makes it the perfect setting for me to talk about a situation that arose in my long-running campaign, which is probably going on for about, I don't know now, maybe 2-3 years. It's been going on a very long time with a few of my close friends. I think in total there's about 8 of us. And it's been a hell of a ride from kind of start to... Well, it's not even finished yet, but from start to where we are at the moment. And I just wanted to cover one of the interesting things that happened in the campaign, something that really took me off guard as a DM. And, you know, not to toot my own trumpet too much, but I guess I'm not really caught off guard that often. And I think it's for newer DMs, it's easier to be caught off guard. But I think once you've played with your player group long enough, I think you start to get a feel for, you know, who your players are, what they're likely to do, and it becomes easier. It's not perfect. It's not 100%, but it becomes much easier to predict what your players are going to do. So, I mean, this is a situation where I got completely thrown off guard, and I was about 2 years in when this happened. So it hasn't happened particularly recently. The group have moved on from this instance, but it threw me so off guard and I had to improvise. I just kind of wanted to share this story with you, hopefully primarily because it's entertaining and relatively interesting, and maybe it's something you could use in your campaign, but also to kind of highlight that things like this are going to happen no matter how experienced you are as a DM, or, you know, even as a player, you will experience times where your DM kind of fumbles over, like, oh shit, wait, you did what again? Okay. Like, there are going to be times like that as a player, and I think you have to come to terms with your DM is not infallible. You know, they are merely a human, and even though it doesn't appear that way always, you know, when they sprout storylines, NPCs out of nowhere, your DMs are fallible. So I guess without cocking around too much, let me get into it. I'm just getting my notes over here. So, to set the scene a bit, we have a group, a very ragtag group from basically a mixture of backgrounds. And at the very beginning of the campaign, they entered a wizard's tower all together as a group. Essentially, they got a letter from the wizard who had created this tower out of nowhere, along with thousands of other people that got the same letter, kind of saying to these travellers and adventurers, I challenge you to take on this tower, see if you can beat it. And this group formed because of that, and because of how there was a kind of a dwarven bookie who was trying to group a few adventurers together and then put bets on whether the group was going to return or not after entering the tower. And one way or another, my group, or the group, got put together by this dwarf to attempt the tower. And then that's kind of like how that bit of the story goes. Anyway, they defeat the tower, but at the very end of the tower, doppelgangers of the players are created. In a very kind of mixed up roundabout way. They step into a mirror, and out of the other side of the mirror as they step in, doppelgangers of themselves step out, and the doppelgangers disperse themselves, running out of the tower, and the group have been trying to catch up to them ever since to try and find out what these doppelgangers are doing, what their motives are, and kind of exploring the world after the doppelgangers have had their kind of effect on it. So they're seeing people that, recognise them along the way, even though it was their doppelganger. Old friends that they run into say, oh, I saw you the other day, blah, blah. Anyway, you get the idea. Anyway, so this whole doppelganger plot, the main storyline, leads the group to a kind of an arduous swamp to the very south of the continent that they're exploring. Now, this swamp is absolute hell. The ground is completely boggy. You don't know where you're going to slip into. Many of the players can find themselves waist deep in like a single second. They're walking on dry, normal ground, and then bam, you're stuck all the way in to this horrible muddy ground. And there's these big kind of gelatinous spheres which are made up of multiple kind of big tadpoles. Now, if you imagine frog spawn kind of all grouped together in a single bundle, like a sphere of frog spawn, all these like half born, well, they're not half born, but half made tadpoles within these frog spawn spheres, and this big sphere rolling around the swamp, trying to engulf anything that gets in its way, and then all the flesh-eating tadpoles inside all wriggle and will eat whatever is consumed by this giant sphere of frog spawn rolling around. So you get the idea. The swamp is pretty treacherous. It's horrible. It's hot. It's humid. It's damp. It's horrible. But the players had only just arrived, and they have all of this in store for them. Now, one of the interesting things I put at the front of the swamp, I didn't think they were going to get into there. On Roll20, I make my maps from scratch, and I didn't think they were going to get into this little alcove that I had made, this little secret grove in between the trees. But I made it anyway because I just thought it would be interesting. And the players stumble into this little grove, and they see on the floor, they see a green tunic wearing elf lying face down on the floor, head caved in by some sort of rock, lifeless, next to a stone altar. Now, on this stone altar, it's kind of like a pedestal. So it's a hexagonal stone platform. And then on top of that platform, there is a sword pedestal with a rusty old sword kind of implanted. Think Legend of Zelda. I basically went for Legend of Zelda here. Temple of Time, the Master Sword sticking out of the stone, that kind of thing. But it's in the middle of a swamp. And the sword is rusted. And there's a dead Link-like character with his head bashed in next to it. Now, I wasn't expecting the players to find this, and when they originally arrived at the swamp, I thought they might play it quite safe, and kind of group together, travel slowly through the swamp, and take their time, and that's why I wanted to have all these enemies lurking about to try and push them to go a bit further. Anyway, they kind of got rid of that approach immediately when they entered the swamp, and they started scouting out. And one of the players found this little alcove by chance, and called over to the other players and said, hey, I found this really cool thing. It could be a magical sword on there. Obviously, we need to be careful. Anyway, the first player steps on to the altar, and I send them a message on Discord, a secret message on Discord, saying, you step onto the altar, and you are overtaken with magic. You need to make the others join you. The Force compels you. Now, I send this message to the player, and the player, as expected, kind of fumbles their words slightly when the players ask, "Oh, what did you find? Oh, what was there?" But no, they retain their composure. And they do exactly as I, have instructed them on Discord. They say, "Hey, yeah, no, it's really interesting. Why don't you come take a look?" A few more of them, 2 more of them, join them on the platform. I send them the same message on Discord. And unfortunately, for the members not on the altar quite yet, the ones that are just catching up, the ones that had scouted kind of an area up to the north and had been called back down to go to this little sacred grove, they were on their way. However, the tiefling warlock of our group, who has a notorious streak of charming everything in his path, has stepped onto the altar. And as he tries to convince the other players, as with the other PCs on the altar, they're all trying to convince the other players. The players not on the altar smell that something's up. They're like, "Okay, this is weird. Why don't you come off the altar and just bring the sword down and show us?" However, all according to plan, and the need to make the others join you, the warlock uses charm to get one of the other players onto the altar, which obviously the other 2 are completely overthrown. Like, okay, we need to get you guys off. One of them has a rope, tries to build a lasso, tries to get them off, fails the strength check. They don't make it. So the 2 players are there, sat, wondering what the hell are we going to do to get these guys off? Because they're like trying to beckon the 2 players that aren't on the altar, over. They're doing everything in their power. Then the warlock, who's been, quite this charming player, realizes that one of the players not on the altar has a real weakness for gold. And all the players, following the warlock's instruction, get out their gold and hold it in front of that player, kind of beckoning them over with a huge amount of gold. The player who's playing, this is a tabaxi, by the way, who's obsessed with gold coins. The tabaxi falls for it immediately. Fails the insight check. "Yeah, no, of course I'll join you." However, the warlock, being clever as well, pulls back some of the coins and says, "Only if you bring your friend with you." Tabaxi uses a strength check. The dwarf who is with the tabaxi fails the dexterity check to kind of move out the way, gets dragged on by the tabaxi onto the altar. Fun and games complete, all the players like roaring with laughter. It was a great little bit of subversion. Everyone's on the altar. Me, as a DM, I'm sweating bullets. I didn't think all of the players would get on the platform. Of course, it's fundamentally designed for it to kind of trick everyone to get onto the platform. And then, supposedly in the plot of the campaign, I would have a witch use this platform to lure kind of passers-by into the trap, and then she would kind of dissect these people for her own doing. However, that didn't quite fit in with the narrative now, because we had all these players, and I was like, oh shit. So all of them have fallen for the trap, and I was there literally like gobsmacked, like, fuck, you all fell for it. How did you all fall for it? How did this happen? But of course, it was my own fault for kind of making this and not having something thought through. And obviously, if you're a DM and you create something like this, you always have to have something thought through. But this is the one time I thought, they're not too stupid to fall for that. But the players were stupid enough to fall for that. So I had to improvise. I had to think about what am I going to do. And in this map that I'd created on Roll20, there was a small village at the other side of this swamp. A small village of kind of weirdos. They kind of live off poisonous frogs, which kind of affect their mind and their psyche, and they're all a bit weird and a bit twisted. Now, originally this village was going to be harmless. They were just going to be at the kind of helplessness of the witches, and they were going to try and employ the players to free them from this kind of binding contract that they've worked themselves into with the witches. However, I thought to myself, I have to do something. Like, I have to do something now and try and like get the players out of this. So I basically made that the trap was made by the villagers in order to get sacrifices for the witches. So I say to the players, you all black out. You know, you're on the platform for so long, time passes by, you have no idea how long you've been on the platform. However, when you awake, you are tied up in this village, basically being prepared to be sacrificed to the witches. So the village people can kind of live in peace. They offer these sacrifices to the witches. So this was kind of like the time where I needed to improvise, and it was lucky I had that village made. If I didn't have that village made, I don't know what I was going to do. But it just goes to show you, like, you can create these interesting, cool things where, you know, if a player steps in here, they suddenly are taken over by a mysterious force, and they are trying to convince the other players to join them and, you know, become one with this entity. And, you know, in a DM's mind, you always kind of give your players the benefit of the doubt normally. You say, okay, well, they're probably likely to do this. They're not that stupid that they would all fall for it. But this completely took me by surprise. And I guess if I had any tips about how to avoid this situation, again, I'd say it's always good to have a plan. Like, no matter what puzzle you have, like, even if you thought of a really good riddle or puzzle or dungeon or encounter or anything, always have a backup plan. So if they need to answer a really, really tough riddle, how do you get around it? If the players cannot for the life of them do it, how do the players get around it? Is it hidden on a note somewhere in the room that they would find? You know, if they actually gave up on the riddle and they started just searching the room, would they find this note that just has the answer? Or would they actually have to use like intelligence checks, and then you give them kind of tips on what it might be, what the answer might be? Anything like that, you need an answer for it. And sometimes that is going to be improv. Sometimes that will be improv in the way that, okay, I wasn't going to use this village, but now I have to use this village. Or, okay, I wasn't going to use this trapdoor just yet, but now I'm going to use it. So, yeah, if I could say anything, have an answer for, like, every scenario that you create. Encounters is easier. Like, you can have enemies disappear, or, like, perhaps they fight for a little bit, they get bored and then they run away, or they get scared and they run away. That's okay with encounters, you can do that. And even wild creatures and demons and other kind of monsters, you know, it's difficult for the players to know their motive. So not all monsters are going to just fight to the death and then, you know, die, or the players die. You know, some monsters will toy with them for a bit and then they'll just run off. So encounters are easy enough to kind of cover in that aspect. But yeah, especially puzzles, traps and things like that, you always got to think of, like, it's horrible to say because I'm just imagining my players listening to this and hating it, but you got to think of like the idiot's guide or the idiot's way through, in a way that, like, okay, there must be a way for the players. Anyway, I hope that's a relatively entertaining story for you. I just thought it'd be a good way to start Tavern Talk, talking about one of the kind of times where I really struggled as a DM. And there'll definitely be more Tavern Talk in the future. Just kind of things to listen to, like, as a podcast, you know, just at work or if you're on the train, during a lovely commute or whatever. But yeah, so I guess that ends the first episode of Tavern Talk. I'd be really interested to hear, like, your predicaments and scenarios that you've gotten yourselves into. I mean, if you have any advice as well, that would be really greatly appreciated. Not only from me, but obviously other people that watch the video, other people that see the comments. As a DM, it's great to share advice. So by all means, please do share in the comments. And if you liked, you know, this bit of Tavern Talk, give this video a like. Subscribe for more content. I've got Item of the Week Season 2 coming out, like, really shortly. I don't know if by the time I get this out, it's going to be already started, but yeah, I've kind of revamped that whole thing. And I guess, yeah, I'm just enjoying the sunset now. I'm just watching it as the sun kind of descends below the tree line. The orange glow kind of overtakes the sky. It's a lovely evening. Anyway, wherever you are, whenever you are, have a lovely evening, morning, afternoon. and I will catch you next time on Tavern Talk. Take care.